Welcome to our webinar about how AI has shifted marketing and what you need to know about it. I'm Eric Holtzclaw, strategist at Liger, and today I'm going to talk to you about the importance of thinking about AI from a couple of different perspectives. First, for any of you that are in Atlanta, you know that the FIFA World Cup is coming here in June. But did you know that the average World Cup player is about 27 years old? Which means most of them have trained for about 20 years using the same rule book. Well, imagine arriving in Atlanta after training over 2 decades, and you get to the World Cup to discover the rule book has changed. Well, marketing has spent the last 15 to 20 years optimizing for search. The field looks the same, the stadium is full, the teams are ready, but the criteria for winning has shifted. This is the position that marketing finds itself in now. And for you as owners, marketers, executives, and organizations, you likely have questions. What if the experience that we used to use is still relevant? How do we adapt quickly? And what does that mean for the teams that we already have built internally? First, we need to understand what has changed. Search used to send people to your website. Now, AI answers the questions before they click. If your business isn't part of the answer, you're invisible. So, what now? There are a couple of things that leaders are looking at and trying to understand from a question perspective. How has SEO evolved? How does the digital infrastructure need to adapt for this new rule book? And what does the team structure need to look like to align with this model? We're going to cover each of these in order, looking at SEO and how buyers are finding your organization, what you need to do in your infrastructure to make sure that that's successful and that you're moving people across the new quote unquote buyer journey, and understand what you need to do with your team as you move forward. First, let's talk about SEO. For SEO, there are three different areas that we really need to think about. The field looks the same, but the rules of the game have changed. We need to be running new plays. If you think about SEO, search engine optimization, that drives keyword traffic. AEO, answer engine optimization, ensures your content can be extracted in response to a specific question. And then finally, GEO, which is generative engine or optimization, that influences how your brand is summarized when AI systems synthesize information. The difference is where you influence your buyer. Keyword traffic drives site visits. Structured answers attract high intent buyers. Summarization shapes consideration before they even visit your website. In B2B markets in particular, perception often forms before a click. And when I talk about B2B, I talk about something that is considered and highly relational, that takes many people to be part of the process to make a decision. And the decision that's made has consequences, not only for you, but also maybe for your employees, for those that you're working with. A transactional decision is simply driven by making a choice and being driven by some type of incentive. So first, let's look a little bit at how this shift has happened in real time. And I use the example of finding a payroll provider. So the first thing I asked was just what is one of the top payroll providers? And you'll notice that Gusto comes up in the AI overview. It's listed along others like ADP and OnPay. What's very interesting is you have this one area where it talks about the best Square for Square users. So Square has done a good job of making sure that they highlight themselves inside this category. This highlight at the top is not something that I put in place. It's something that's actually showing up in the AI result. So a buyer is being driven immediately to looking at this as one of the top choices. If I make a very small change and add the word Atlanta, which is where Liger is based, then I'll find that there are different answers. So a one-word change makes the AI overview very different. We now have Southern Payroll Services and Guarantee Payroll at the top, along with a new addition of Paycor. Gusto is still in the mix, but it's not as highly recommended as it was on the prior slide. So these are the things that you need to be thinking about as you start to consider how you're talking not only to the buyers, but also to people, to the bots. So the AI that's searching, and as we look at agentic AI, where others are using agents to go do the search for them, how does that agent respond to an agent and actually move this along? So the question is, are you in that summary? Because your competitor might be, and increasingly your customer may never click to find out. In the search example of best payroll companies for small businesses, in the old world, I got a list of links and I had to go do some additional research to decide how to narrow that down. In the new world, as you saw in the last two examples, there's an AI summary and 3 to 5 companies are already bubbling up to the top. Increasingly, your customer may never click a link to find out more information. That's the moment that they're leaning in. People are inherently lazy and they look for summaries and guidance. They also like the fact that something has already been vetted. So there's no reason for them to do that additional search. And as we spoke a moment ago about agents doing the research on their behalf, that's definitely what's going to happen when the agents go out. They're going to trust the companies that show up and show up at the most highest level before making a recommendation back based on the request. Now, this impact is different depending upon the type of purchase. If it's a B2C purchase, which is a short purchase cycle with immediate intent, is transaction focused, then ranking still strongly influences traffic and conversion. So leaning into those keywords, making sure you're showing up, making sure you're running ads that provide some kind of incentive for someone to try you at least the first time is a good tactic. But if you think about B2B, which has a long purchase cycle, there is an extended research phase with multiple stakeholders, and that AI interpretation shapes early perception and shortlists information. So the B2B environments, buyers may be spending weeks and months researching, and AI systems increasingly shape early perception before a prospect ever fills out a form or speaks to one of your sales reps. The good news is a considered sale like a B2B purchase, they do want to talk to someone. They don't want to just buy something directly from a website because they want someone to blame, someone to confirm to them that they're making a good decision. So the game is to make sure that you show up and you are in consideration so that when they go into that answer or engine optimization, they're already using your company's name as a way to determine whether or not you're a good solution for the problem they're trying to solve. So now let's look at what you do with your website infrastructure. What happens to the website and the tech stack? Well, the good news is it's very important. It's actually more important than it may have been in the past, but there's some things you need to do to make sure that that website's going to work for you in the way that you'd hoped and expected. There are 6 areas that we look at that are levers in how your website needs to be defined. Your website is now the way that AI systems describe and summarize your company. We're using a word canonical, which simply means the primary authoritative record of who you are and why you should be chosen. So if you think about building your website and making sure that it's canonical, you need to look at 6 different levers. 1, you need to have clear category positioning. 2, buyer language and answers. 3, depth of expertise. 4, message consistency. 5, a structured architecture. And 6, you need to be validated in the market. So you have market validation. So let's talk about each one of those in a little bit higher, a little bit more deeply. So if your website is now the source AI learns from, these are the levers you need to think about. And when we talk about clear category positioning, most businesses describe themselves in a way that could fit 10 other companies. And if AI can't clearly categorize you, it won't include you. If I asked AI for best payroll company for small business, it's not going to guess what you do. You either show up clearly or you don't show up at all. Defining your ideal client profile and understanding very clearly who you are and who you're for is most important in the new world of AI that services both the humans and the bots. Second, buyer language and answers. Your website usually sounds like how you talk internally, not how your customer thinks. No one wakes up searching integrated workforce optimization. They search, I'm tired of dealing with payroll mistakes. If your site doesn't answer real questions, AI won't either. Third is your depth of expertise. Most companies say they're experts. Very few actually prove it. One blog post that says five tips isn't expertise. A set of content that clearly explains how to evaluate, compare, and choose, that's expertise. AI is looking for signals of authority, not claims. Message consistency. If your website says one thing, your sales team says another, and your LinkedIn says something else, AI assumes you're unclear. If I read your website, then your reviews, then your LinkedIn, and they don't line up, which version is real? How does AI decide? Every inconsistency is a signal against you. A structured architecture. This is the one that no one sees, but it's where AI relies on the most. If your content is buried, scattered, or written like a story instead of an answer, AI can't extract it. Think of it this way. Your website isn't just for humans anymore. It has to be readable by machines. And the machines are looking for clarity, and the humans are looking for emotion. So thinking about them in both of those categories and making sure it serves both is going to be very important moving forward. And finally, market validation. You can say you're great. That doesn't carry much weight. Other people saying it, that's what really matters. Reviews, case studies, mentions, partnerships, those are the signals AI pulls from. If no one else is talking about you, AI has nothing to reinforce. We talk about content in a category called paid, earned, shared, and owned. Owned is very important on your website to make sure it's speaking both to the humans and the robots, but you also need to make sure you have some shared, who are some close companies that you work with that you can share content with. So that way you're pointing both to each other with the same type of messaging. Earned, how are you getting mentions in the press? What do those byline articles look like that confirm that you are what you say you are on your website and in your social media? And then paid, which are the ads and the opportunities to speak in organizations or trade shows and conferences. Each one of those really plays a very important role to making sure you're showing up not only for the humans, but also for the AI. So here's some examples of things that you need to make sure you're maybe avoiding as your website is canonical. First, you need to make sure you're not being vague in your positioning and you're being very clear. So on the left side, I have an example of a non-specific answer. We help businesses grow through innovative solutions, compared to we provide outsourced bookkeeping and financial reporting for service-based businesses with under $5 million in revenue. Notice the specificity between the first one and the second. Why this works. AI and buyers can't categorize innovative solutions. The second one is instantly classifiable and searchable. Example 2. We offer a full suite of digital marketing services, including SEO, PPC, and social media. A better would be we assist home service companies with generating qualified leads through Google search and local ads. Why this works. Nobody is searching for full suite. They're searching for outcomes. The second aligns with how buyers actually think and search and what they care about and what's not working for them within their current marketing stack or ecosystem. Non-specific. We specialize in integrated HR solutions and workforce optimization. Better, we manage payroll benefits and compliance without needing a full-time HR team for companies with 10 to 100 employees. The bad version sounds like a brochure. The good version sounds like a solution to a real headache. Now let me ask you, if I asked AI what your company does, would it sound like the left or the right? because that's exactly what your customers are doing now. Most businesses in your category are not doing this yet, which means there's a window to stand out. But the companies that get clear first are the ones AI learns from. And once that happens, it's very, very hard to catch up. Looking at your digital infrastructure overall, the categories that you need to worry about or think about are your website, which before drove traffic conversions. Today, it defines how the market understands you. Your tech stack, which was automated campaigns before, can I send a message to someone across some part of the ecosystem? Today, keeps your positioning consistent everywhere. What you say in one place needs to be said in the other. Your CRM, which was tracking pipeline, now aligns your sales and marketing around one message, which is far more important than it's ever been in the past. And your analytics, which reported performance, now shows where your messaging is unclear or misaligned. So instead of looking to the past, what were the number of clicks? Where did people go? Where are people need more clarity? Where are we losing them along the path? Today, every disconnected message is a signal to AI that you were unclear. And if you're unclear, AI is not going to know what to do or where to send people. So what does this mean for my marketing team? How does it evolve? What I've seen in the market is that there's been a pendulum swing too far in one direction where companies believe that they can focus just on having a very, very small marketing team because the tactics are taken care of. Well, as always been true, the tactics are important, but not as important as some of the other things that marketing is doing for the organization. Marketing now has an expanded mandate. We need to think about marketing differently and what it's responsible for. At Liger, we've always advocated that marketing is responsible from cradle to grave, from the first time that the customer shows up all the way to the point that they offboard, all the messages that move across. And that was important and made things consistent and it impacted attrition. But today, in the world where AI is looking for who you are and what you do, it becomes increasingly important. The core capabilities of marketing stand as making sure that you have a clear category position, that there's strategic messaging frameworks in place, buyer language and structured answers are appropriate and in your buyer language. You have a content architecture that can be interpreted by AI and by the buyers, that you have proof and authority developed, and that there's AI fluency and modern insight tools. So you want your marketing team to be using AI, but they also need to be thinking both from a human perspective and a robot perspective. Garbage in is garbage out. These are things that marketing must continue to own. But there's now this need for cross-functional orchestration. Sales needs to reinforce your positioning in the market. Your product differentiation needs to be very clear, and it cannot be based on features and functions. It must be the value, the thing that the problem that the buyer really wants to fix. Your customer experience must deliver on what is promised. IT and data are your structure systems for clarity. So how do you make sure what you're seeing on the front end is working also on the back end and not getting in the way of AI? And your executive team has to maintain that narrative discipline. So as marketing moves forward, it's about orchestrating across all these organizations and making sure that the message doesn't get diluted, because the second it does, AI is confused and doesn't know whether or not you're a solution that should be suggested. And that increase in zero-click searches, where are you going to show up in other places in the ecosystem such that they're searching for your brand from the start? So now we have a new game plan. We've been playing the game for many, many years in the same way. In fact, in my opinion, marketing became boring for a period of time because there were some ways that you could game the system. But we have to get back to some of the basics of what marketing has always been, which is the promise to the customer and a clear understanding of why you might choose one company over the other. So in this new game plan, there are 4 things that you really need to look at. You need to look at your clarity, and that is the word of the year for Liger. What is your structure? How are you being consistent? And are you trusted? For clarity, make sure you have clear category positioning and buyer language. That impact on AI is going to be accurate categorization and summarization. Your structure needs to be organized well-defined content, and reliable, which was going to provide reliable extraction and interpretation for AI. You need consistency. Once you have aligned messaging across your websites, sales, PR, and systems, that reinforced representation is going to show up across all your sources, and AI is going to know who you are and where you fit. And you need trust, documented proof, validation, and real customer outcomes. Those strong authority signals are going to be when AI is most likely to include you in a set of results, both to the human and to the agents that it'll be dealing with in the future. Historically, systems optimized just for execution. Today, those systems influence how AI interprets and represents your brand. So if you're curious of where you are as a company, we have an AI visibility snapshot. The structure of this system looks at how AI systems currently classify your company, describe your offerings, interpret your differentiation, and reflect your authority signals. This reveals the gaps in how you define yourself and how the market's AI systems represent you, and gives you a roadmap for what needs to be corrected and in what order. That first step is around clarity. So if you follow this QR code and use the code Insperity, we'd be glad to send that to you so that you can take a look at where you stand today. Thank you so much for your time. AI is making a dramatic impact not only on the way we do our work, but how our customers are finding us. Of all the categories that we've seen impact, AI is impacting marketing the most. It's starting to make changes in operations, and we can argue whether or not it's automation or AI. But if you think about what's happening in the marketing world in particular, these buyer signals have definitely changed, and it's time to change the way that we play the game.